The antiseptic smell of the hospital room burned my nostrils as I sat beside Margaret holding her frail hand in mine. My wife of 43 years was fighting stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and every labored breath she took felt like it might be her last. That's when Jennifer walked in, checking her phone and barely glancing at her dying mother. "Dad, I'm heading out to Hawaii tomorrow," she announced, adjusting her designer purse. "The old woman doesn't have much time left anyway. I don't want to waste all my time sitting here." I stared at my daughter, wondering when she'd become a stranger. The silence in room 314 became my constant companion after Jennifer left for her tropical getaway. I maintained my vigil beside Margaret, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like a prayer. The woman who'd raised our children, who'd stood by me through bankruptcy and rebuilding my construction company from nothing, now lay fighting for every moment of life, while our eldest daughter sipped cocktails on a beach. Margaret's fingers would occasionally twitch in mine, and her eyes would flutter open for brief moments before consciousness slipped away again. During those precious seconds of awareness, she'd squeeze my hand with surprising strength, as if reminding me she was still here, still fighting. The doctors had given us weeks, maybe a month if we were lucky, but I knew my Margaret. She was tougher than any cancer, stronger than any prognosis. I found myself thinking about how Jennifer had changed over the years, particularly after marrying Preston 5 years ago. That pharmaceutical sales rep had swept into our lives with his smooth talk and expensive suits, filling Jennifer's head with ideas about maximizing life experiences and not being held back by obligations. The daughter who used to call her mother every day slowly became someone who barely visited on holidays. To pass the time and feel closer to Margaret, I decided to organize some of her belongings that Amy, our middle daughter, had brought from home. Margaret always liked having familiar things around her photos and mementos that reminded her of happier times. In one box, tucked beneath photo albums, I discovered something that stopped me cold: Jennifer's diary from high school. I shouldn't have read it, but something compelled me to open those pages. The entries were filled with love and admiration for her mother. "Mom is my best friend." One entry read, "I can't imagine life without her. When I get married, I want to be just like her." Another passage described how Margaret had stayed up all night, helping Jennifer with a science project, never complaining, despite having worked a double shift at the hospital where she was a nurse. The contrast between these heartfelt words and Jennifer's callous departure left me reeling. What had happened to that loving girl? When had my daughter's heart turned so cold that she could abandon her dying mother for a vacation? Margaret stirred her eyes, opening with more clarity than I'd seen in days. "Robert," she whispered, her voice raspy but coherent. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, leaning closer. "How are you feeling?" "Where's Jenny?" she asked, using the childhood nickname that Jennifer now hated. The lie came easily born from a desire to protect her from more pain. "She went to get some coffee. She'll be back soon." Margaret's eyes, still sharp despite her illness, studied my face. "No, she didn't," she said softly. "I heard her talking on the phone 2 weeks ago, Robert. She was asking someone about inheritance timelines and when they could move forward with some plan." My blood chilled. "What exactly did you hear?" "She was in the hallway, thought I was sleeping. She said something about how it wouldn't be much longer, and then they could finally get what they deserved." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I kept telling myself I misheard, that our daughter couldn't possibly mean what it sounded like. I squeezed her hand gently, my mind racing. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was hoping I was wrong. The medications make me confused sometimes. I thought maybe I dreamed it." She closed her eyes, exhausted from the effort of speaking. "But I didn't dream it, did I?" My construction company instincts, honed from 40 years of reading blueprints and spotting flaws, kicked into overdrive. I started replaying the past few months in my mind, seeing patterns I'd been too distracted to notice before. Jennifer had been unusually interested in our financial affairs lately, asking about life insurance policies, requesting copies of our will, even suggesting we update our power of attorney documents. She'd pushed particularly hard for Margaret to be moved to hospice care, arguing it would be more comfortable for her. But Dr. Harrison had been clear that with aggressive treatment, Margaret had a fighting chance. The new immunotherapy showed promise, and while the odds weren't great, they weren't zero either. Jennifer had seemed almost disappointed when we'd chosen to continue treatment. There had been other signs, too. She'd asked detailed questions about my construction company's value, about our investment accounts, about the rental properties we'd accumulated over the years. At the time, I'd thought she was finally taking an interest in the family business, maybe even considering joining me like I'd always hoped. I kissed Margaret's forehead as she drifted back to sleep, then stepped into the hallway to make a phone call. My lawyer, Frank Stevenson, answered on the second ring. "Frank, I need you to check something for me," I said, keeping my voice low. "Has anyone been asking about my estate planning recently? Any inquiries about life insurance beneficiaries or will contents?" There was a pause. "Actually, Robert, now that you mention it, someone claiming to be your financial advisor called last week asking for confirmation about beneficiary designations. I found it odd since you've never mentioned having a financial advisor other than me." "Did they give a name?" "Preston Wheeler. Said he was helping you consolidate your affairs during this difficult time." I gripped the phone, tighter pieces falling into place. Preston was Jennifer's husband's full name, though he usually went by his middle name James in social settings. "Frank, I need you to pull all my files. Every insurance policy, every legal document. I think we might have a problem." After ending the call, I returned to Margaret's room, my mind churning. I thought about confronting Jennifer, demanding answers, but something held me back. If my suspicions were correct, if my own daughter was truly plotting something unthinkable, I needed more than suspicions. I needed proof. I opened my phone and scrolled through Jennifer's social media. Her Instagram was already filling with Hawaii photos, pristine beaches, sunset dinners, her and Preston raising champagne glasses in a toast. The caption on one photo made my stomach turn. "Living life to the fullest, no regrets." While her mother lay dying, while her father kept a lonely vigil, she was celebrating. But it was the comments that caught my attention. A friend had written, "So sorry about your mom. Can't believe you're being so strong." Jennifer's response, "Thanks, hun. It's what she would want. No point in everyone suffering." I looked at my wife, fighting for each breath, and made a decision. If Jennifer was planning something, if she'd truly become someone capable of viewing her mother's death as a financial opportunity, then I would find out. And I would stop her. Because the one thing Jennifer had apparently forgotten about her old man was this: I hadn't built my construction company from nothing by being naive. I'd dealt with crooked contractors, corrupt inspectors, and cutthroat competitors. I knew how to spot a con, how to document everything, and how to protect what was mine. And Margaret? She was everything that was mine. Our life together, our love, our future, whether it was measured in weeks or years, that was what mattered. If our daughter had forgotten that if Preston had poisoned her mind with greed, then they were about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating Robert Sullivan. I settled back into my chair, taking Margaret's hand again. Tomorrow I would begin investigating in earnest. Tonight I would simply be here, present in each moment with the woman I loved. But one thing was certain. Whatever Jennifer was planning, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. 3 days after Jennifer's departure to Hawaii, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting my daughter with accusations that might push her deeper into whatever scheme she was hatching, I chose the path of patience. My old friend Gary Hutchinson answered his phone with the gruff voice I remembered from our Army days. "Bobby Sullivan," he said, using my old nickname. "Been too long, brother. How's Margaret doing?" "Not good, Gary. That's actually why I'm calling. I need your professional services." Gary had retired from the Detroit Police Department 5 years ago and started his own private investigation firm. It's delicate. Family matter? Say no more. When and where? We met at a diner on 8 Mile Road far from the hospital and any chance encounters. Gary looked older, but still carried himself like the detective who'd solved more cases than anyone else in his precinct. I laid out my suspicions, showing him the social media posts explaining the overheard conversation, the sudden interest in finances. Gary listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in a small pad. When I finished, he leaned back and studied me. You sure you want to go down this road, Bobby? Once we open this door, there's no closing it. My daughter's planning something, Gary. I need to know what. He nodded slowly. All right, give me 72 hours for preliminary surveillance and background. I'll dig into their finances, see what's got them so interested in your money. When Jennifer called that evening from Hawaii, I was ready with my performance. How's Mom? She asked, her voice carrying forced concern over the sound of waves and reggae music. Not well, sweetheart, I said, letting my voice crack. The doctors think it might be sooner than expected. Her organs are starting to shut down. I paused, listening to her breathing. I'm scared, Jenny. I don't know how I'll manage without her. There was a moment of silence, then her voice brightened almost imperceptibly before she caught herself. Oh, Dad, I'm so sorry. Maybe it's for the best. She won't have to suffer much longer. Maybe you're right, I agreed weakly. I just feel so lost. Your mother handled all our finances, you know. I don't even know where she keeps the insurance papers. Don't worry about that stuff right now, Jennifer said quickly. When I get back, Preston and I will help you sort through everything. He's really good with financial planning. After hanging up, I felt sick. The eagerness in her voice when discussing finances, the quick pivot from her mother's suffering to insurance papers, it all confirmed my worst fears. But I needed more than suspicions and gut feelings. Gary's first report came 48 hours later. We met in the hospital cafeteria during the afternoon shift change when it was mostly empty. He slid a folder across the table, his expression grim. Your daughter and her husband are drowning Bobby. They owe $380,000 between credit cards, failed business ventures, and personal loans. Preston got fired from his pharmaceutical sales job 6 months ago for expense account fraud. They've been living on credit ever since. I flipped through the documents, each page revealing another layer of deception. Luxury car leases they couldn't afford, a house in foreclosure proceedings, credit cards maxed out on designer goods and expensive trips. How did I not know about this? They've been keeping up appearances, Gary explained, borrowing from one card to pay another, taking out personal loans. But the house of cards is collapsing. They've got about 30 days before the foreclosure goes public and their cars get repossessed. So they're desperate, I said, understanding dawning. Desperate enough to do something stupid. Gary confirmed. But Bobby, there's more. I found something that made my blood run cold. He produced another document, this one showing email communications between Jennifer and someone named Dr. Melissa Crane. She calls herself a death doula, but she's really a consultant who advises families on end-of-life care. Perfectly legal on the surface, but some of her advice treads very close to the line. I read through the emails, my hands beginning to shake. Jennifer had asked detailed questions about pain medication protocols, specifically about morphine dosages and what combinations might ease suffering more quickly. Dr. Crane's responses were carefully worded, but unmistakable in their implications. This woman is teaching my daughter how to… I couldn't finish the sentence. To speed up the process, Gary said quietly. Nothing that would show up as murder on an autopsy, especially in a terminal cancer patient. Just enough to ensure things move along faster than nature intended. I thought about Margaret's sudden decline after Jennifer's last visit, how she'd seemed to be improving until that night when Jennifer had stopped by with her special herbal tea that would help Mom sleep better. There's one more thing, Gary said, pulling out his phone. I've got a contact in hospital security. 3 nights before Jennifer left for Hawaii, she entered your wife's room at 3 in the morning during a shift change. She stayed for 20 minutes. He showed me a grainy security photo of Jennifer entering the hospital at an hour when visiting was restricted, carrying her large designer purse. The next day, according to the medical records I've obtained through, let's say, unofficial channels, Margaret's kidney function showed marked decline. I stared at the photo of my daughter sneaking through hospital corridors, like a thief in the night. The little girl who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, who I'd taught to ride a bike and walked down the aisle, had become someone I didn't recognize. "What do you want to do, Bobby?" Gary asked gently. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. "Every meeting, every phone call, every search on their computers. I want to know exactly what they're planning and how far they're willing to go." Gary nodded. "I'll need access to your financial records to see what they might be after. And, Bobby, you might want to take some precautions. If they're willing to go after Margaret..." He didn't need to finish. If my daughter and her husband were capable of trying to hasten my wife's death, what else might they do? "What do you suggest?" "First, change all your passwords. Set up fraud alerts on all accounts. Maybe stay with family when you're not at the hospital. And document everything, every conversation, every visit. If this goes where I think it's going, you'll need evidence." I returned to Margaret's room with a heavy heart, but a clear purpose. She was awake, more alert than she'd been in days. "Robert," she said, managing a weak smile. "You look troubled." I took her hand, careful of the IV lines. "Just worried about you, sweetheart." She studied my face with those knowing eyes that had seen through every poker face I'd ever tried in 4 decades of marriage. "It's Jennifer, isn't it? You found out what I heard?" I nodded, unable to lie to her even now. "It's worse than we thought. She and Preston are in financial trouble. They're planning things." Margaret's grip tightened on my hand. "Then we fight," she said with surprising strength. "I didn't survive 40 years of marriage, raise 3 daughters, and battle cancer just to let greed destroy our family. What do you need me to do?" "Just focus on getting better," I said. "Leave Jennifer to me." "Robert Sullivan, don't you dare sideline me in my own life," she said, her old fire flickering in her eyes. "I may be sick, but I'm not dead yet. If our daughter has lost her way, then we face it together like we've faced everything else." Looking at my wife, frail but fierce, I felt a surge of love and determination. Jennifer thought she was dealing with a dying woman and a broken old man. She was wrong on both counts. Margaret was a fighter, and I was far from broken. I was just getting started. "All right," I said, squeezing her hand. "Together. But first, I need you to promise me something. Next time Jennifer visits, pretend to be unconscious. No matter what she says or does, don't react. Can you do that?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You're setting a trap." "I'm protecting us," I corrected. "Both of us. Because Gary found evidence that suggests you're not the only target. They've been researching life insurance policies on me, too." The monitors beeped steadily as Margaret processed this information. Finally, she nodded. "Then we give them enough rope to hang themselves. But Robert, when this is over, however it ends, we don't let it destroy us. We've got other daughters, maybe grandchildren someday. We don't let Jennifer's choices poison our entire family." I kissed her forehead gently. "Agreed, but first we stop them, whatever it takes." As I settled back into my chair for another long night, I thought about the investigation expanding before me. Gary would dig deeper into their finances and communications. I would play the part of the grief-stricken, vulnerable father. And brave Margaret, would pretend to be slipping away while actually fighting harder than ever. Jennifer thought she was playing chess while we were stuck playing checkers. She was about to learn that her old parents had been playing this game much longer than she'd been alive. And in this game, patience and preparation beat greed and desperation every time. The next morning arrived with unexpected news that would accelerate everything. Dr. Harrison entered Margaret's room with a concerned expression that immediately put me on alert. He was a good man, mid-50s, with silver at his temples, and the kind of steady hands you wanted in an oncologist. "Robert, could I speak with you privately?" he asked, glancing at Margaret's sleeping form. We stepped into the hallway, and he closed the door behind us. "I need to discuss something sensitive. We've run some additional tests on Margaret's blood work, and we found some anomalies." My pulse quickened. "What kind of anomalies?" "Traces of substances that shouldn't be in her system. Specifically, we've detected metabolites consistent with certain paralytic agents and sedatives that aren't part of her prescribed treatment protocol." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Robert, is there any chance someone might be introducing foreign substances into Margaret's treatment?" I made a quick decision to trust him. "Dr. Harrison, I've hired a private investigator. We have reason to believe my daughter may be trying to hasten her mother's death for financial gain." His face went through several expressions before settling on professional concern, mixed with personal outrage. "Are you telling me someone is poisoning my patient?" "I think so. We have security footage of her entering the room at unusual hours, emails discussing medication interactions, and evidence of severe financial distress that would be solved by Margaret's life insurance." Dr. Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then his jaw set with determination. "All right, here's what we're going to do. First, I'm ordering a complete toxicology panel, something more comprehensive than our standard tests. Second, we're going to set up some security measures that won't raise suspicion." "What kind of measures?" "I'll have nursing staff increase their rounds, but more importantly, we can install medical monitoring equipment that happens to include video capability. It's technically for observing patient responses to treatment, but it will capture anyone who enters the room." He pulled out his phone. "I'm also going to have a conversation with hospital security. If someone is attempting to harm a patient in my care, we're going to stop them." Within hours, the plan was in motion. 2 new monitors were installed in Margaret's room, ostensibly to track her vital signs more closely. What Jennifer wouldn't know was that these units contained high-definition cameras with night vision capability, all recording to a secure server. I called Jennifer that afternoon, putting on my best worried father voice. "Jenny, honey, your mother's asking for you. The doctors say she's having more lucid moments, but they don't know how long it will last. Can you come home?" There was a pause, then the sound of muffled conversation with Preston. "Dad, we're supposed to stay until Saturday. The flights are non-refundable and—" "Please," I said, letting my voice break. "She keeps calling your name. I don't think she has much time left, and she wants to see you." The combination of guilt and the hint that death was imminent worked. "Okay, Dad, we'll catch the red-eye tonight. We should be there by tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, I made my next call to Frank Stevenson, my lawyer. "Frank, I need you to prepare some documents for me. I want to restructure my entire estate into an irrevocable trust immediately." "That's a big move, Robert. Mind if I ask why the urgency?" "Let's just say I've discovered some family members may not have my best interests at heart. I want everything locked down tight. The construction company, the rental properties, all investment accounts, everything goes into the trust with very specific distribution instructions." "Who do you want as trustee?" "My brother James," I said without hesitation. James was a retired judge, tough as nails and completely incorruptible. "And Frank, I want you to change the beneficiaries on all life insurance policies. Remove Jennifer entirely." There was a pause. "Robert, removing a child from inheritance is a serious step. Are you certain?" "I'm certain. But here's the thing, I don't want anyone to know about these changes yet. Can you keep them confidential until I say otherwise?" "Attorney-client privilege, my friend. No one will hear about this from me." While Frank worked on the legal documents, Gary called with another disturbing discovery. "Bobby, I've been digging into Preston's online activity. The man's been researching some pretty dark stuff. Search histories including accidental death insurance payout, how long before inheritance is distributed, and contesting wills in a state court." "So they're planning for my death too." "Looks like it. But here's the kicker: I found a life insurance application in your name that you never signed. It's for $2 million with Jennifer as the sole beneficiary. The signature is a decent forgery, but it won't hold up under scrutiny. When was it filed? 1 month ago, right around the time Margaret's cancer took a turn for the worse. I felt a cold rage building in my chest. My own daughter was planning to kill both her parents for money. Gary, I need everything documented. Every search, every email, every forged document. Already on it. I've got a forensic computer specialist pulling everything from their devices remotely. These idiots didn't even have good passwords. That evening, I sat with Margaret and explained everything we'd discovered. Her face went through a range of emotions: disbelief, hurt anger, and finally determination. "So they're coming back tomorrow?" she asked. "Yes, and we need to be ready. The room is wired with cameras. The police have been notified and will be monitoring. Dr. Harrison has set up dummy IV lines that look real, but aren't connected to your bloodstream." Margaret nodded slowly. "And you want me to pretend to be unconscious?" "Can you do it no matter what she says or does?" "Robert, I spent 30 years as a nurse dealing with the worst humanity has to offer. I can handle my own daughter." Her voice was steady, but I saw the pain in her eyes. "What about after, when she's caught?" "Then justice takes its course," I said firmly. "She made her choice, Margaret. We didn't push her to this." "I know," she whispered. "It just hurts. Where did we go wrong?" "We didn't," I said, taking her hand. "Sometimes people choose darkness despite being raised in light, but we have Amy and Carol. They're good girls. They call every day worried sick about you." Margaret smiled slightly. "True, 2 out of 3 isn't bad." That night, I prepared the final piece of bait. I had Frank draft a false document showing Margaret's life insurance had been increased to $2 million, with a sticky note attached saying, "Confirmed payout within 30 days of death certificate." I left it visible on the bedside table, partially covered by a magazine, as if I'd carelessly forgotten it. The next morning, I met with Detective Patricia Walsh from the Detroit Police Department's Major Crimes Unit. She was a sharp woman in her 40s who listened to the evidence with growing disgust. Mr. Sullivan attempted murder of a terminally ill patient is still attempted murder. If your daughter does what you think she's going to do, we'll arrest her immediately. We'll have undercover officers in the hospital and we're coordinating with security. What about Preston? We'll have units standing by at their residence. The moment she makes her move, we'll pick him up too. The digital evidence Mr. Hutchinson has provided gives us probable cause for conspiracy charges. As the hours ticked by toward Jennifer's arrival, I found myself thinking about the man I used to be versus who I'd become. The younger Robert Sullivan might have confronted Jennifer directly, might have raged and threatened and demanded answers. But age had taught me patience, and the construction business had taught me that the strongest structures are built slowly, carefully, with attention to every detail. Margaret dozed fitfully, conserving her strength for the performance to come. Dr. Harrison stopped by to check the dummy IV setup one more time, making sure everything looked authentic. The clear liquid that appeared to be flowing into Margaret's arm was actually being diverted to a collection bag hidden under the bed. "Are you sure about this, Robert?" he asked quietly. "Once this happens, there's no going back." "Doctor, my daughter already crossed that line when she decided her mother's life was worth less than money. I'm just making sure she faces consequences for her choices." He nodded grimly. "The nursing staff has been briefed. They'll stay clear of the room during the window you specified, but we'll be monitoring closely. The moment anything happens, they can be there in seconds." As afternoon approached, I received a text from Jennifer. "Landed. Getting rental car. Be there in an hour." I looked at Margaret, my partner in everything for over 4 decades. "Ready." She opened her eyes, and for a moment I saw the young woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Ready. Let's save our family by cutting out the cancer that's infected it." "That's my girl," I said, kissing her forehead. "Now remember, no matter what happens, I love you." "I love you too," she replied. "Now go set up your grieving father act. You've got a performance to give." As I settled into my chair, arranging myself to look exhausted and defeated, I thought about how strange life could be. Here I was, setting a trap for my own daughter, working with police to catch her in an attempted murder. But sometimes, love meant making hard choices. And if Jennifer had chosen greed over family, then I would choose justice over enabling her descent into darkness. The setup was complete. The cameras were rolling. The police were in position. The bait was set. Now all that remained was to wait for Jennifer to walk into the trap of her own making. Part of me hoped she would see her mother and break down, confess, beg forgiveness. But the realist in me knew better. The girl who had written those loving diary entries was gone, replaced by someone capable of plotting her parents' deaths. As footsteps echoed in the hallway, growing closer, I took a deep breath and prepared for one of the hardest performances of my life. The final act was about to begin. Jennifer swept into the hospital room at 4:30 in the afternoon, bringing with her the scent of coconut suntan lotion and expensive perfume. Her skin glowed with a fresh tan, a stark contrast to the pallor of the hospital walls and her dying mother. She wore designer sunglasses pushed up on her head and a flowing sundress that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Dad," she said, setting down her Louis Vuitton purse and giving me a perfunctory hug. "How is she?" I let my shoulders slump, rubbing my eyes as if I'd been crying. "Not good, sweetheart. The doctors are just trying to keep her comfortable now." I gestured toward Margaret, who lay still, her breathing shallow but steady. "She's been unconscious since yesterday. They don't think she'll wake up again." Jennifer moved to Margaret's bedside, and I watched her eyes immediately scan the medical equipment before landing on the papers I'd strategically placed. Her pupils dilated slightly when she glimpsed the insurance documents. "2 million?" she murmured under her breath, then caught herself. "I mean, poor Mom. She looks so peaceful." "She is," I said, my voice cracking with genuine emotion, though not for the reason Jennifer assumed. "At least she's not in pain anymore. That's what matters." Jennifer took her mother's hand, the picture of a devoted daughter. For anyone watching, it would have seemed touching. But I noticed she was texting with her other hand, her phone angled away from me. Through my peripheral vision, I caught fragments. "Here now, confirmed amount. Tonight." "Where's Preston?" I asked innocently. "Oh, he went to check us into the hotel. He'll come by later to pay his respects." She settled into the visitor's chair, still holding Margaret's hand. "Dad, you look exhausted. When's the last time you went home, had a proper meal?" "I can't leave her," I said. What if something happens while I'm gone? You need to take care of yourself too." Jennifer said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Why don't you go grab dinner? I'll stay with Mom. It's the least I can do after being away." I hesitated, making a show of uncertainty. "I don't know. Please, Dad. Go. I need some time alone with her anyway. There are things I want to say just in case she can hear me." Finally, I stood, stretching stiff muscles. "Maybe you're right. I could use some fresh air. The cafeteria closed an hour ago, so I'll have to go across the street. Will you be okay?" "Of course," she assured me, already eyeing the IV lines. "Take your time. Mom and I will be fine." I gathered my jacket slowly, noting the false document was now fully exposed on the table. Jennifer's eyes kept darting to it. At the door, I turned back. "Jenny, thank you for coming home. Your mother would be happy knowing you're here." Something flickered across her face. Maybe a remnant of conscience, but it was gone in an instant. "Sure, Dad. Now go eat something." I walked down the hallway, my steps heavy, but purposeful. Around the corner, Detective Walsh waited in plain clothes, looking like any other visitor. I nodded slightly as I passed. In the security office, 2 floors down, I joined Dr. Harrison and Gary, who were already watching the monitors. "She's texting someone." the security officer noted, zooming in on Jennifer's phone. Looks like she's waiting for confirmation about something. We watched as Jennifer stood and moved around the room, checking corners, peering out into the hallway. Satisfied she was alone, she returned to Margaret's bedside and began examining the IV setup closely. "That's my girl," she whispered to Margaret's still form. "Always the fighter, but you need to let go now. It's okay. Everyone will understand." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small syringe pre-filled with clear liquid. My hands clenched into fists as I watched her remove the cap and approach the IV port. "Get ready," Detective Walsh said into her radio. "Suspect is preparing to inject unknown substance." But then something unexpected happened. Jennifer hesitated the syringe inches from the port. She looked at her mother's face, and for a moment I saw my daughter again, the one who used to crawl into our bed during storms. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, and for a second I thought she might stop. "Preston says this is merciful. You're suffering and this will help you sleep. It's better for everyone this way. The insurance will save our house, our future. You understand, don't you? You always said family comes first." The moment passed. She inserted the syringe into what she believed was the IV port and pushed the plunger, emptying the contents into the dummy line. The liquid flowed harmlessly into the collection bag beneath the bed. "There," she said, disposing of the syringe in the sharps container, clearly planning to let it hide among legitimate medical waste. "Just go to sleep, Mom. It'll all be over soon." She sat back down, taking Margaret's hand again, playing the role of the grieving daughter. After 10 minutes, she stood and walked to the nurse's station. We could hear her on the hallway camera. "Excuse me," she said to the duty nurse, her voice shaking with performed emotion. I think my mother's breathing has changed. Could someone check on her?" The nurse, briefed on the situation, played along perfectly. "Of course, dear. Let me get the doctor." Jennifer returned to the room, and we watched her pull out her phone to text. "Done. Looks like tonight. Get ready to play grieving son-in-law." That's when Margaret's eyes fluttered open. Jennifer jumped back, her phone clattering to the floor. Margaret's gaze was clear, fully conscious, and locked on her daughter with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. "Hello, Jennifer," Margaret said clearly. "Did you have a nice vacation?" The color drained from Jennifer's face. "Mom, you were unconscious. The machines." "The machines are fine, dear. So am I. Well, as fine as someone with cancer can be." Margaret's voice was steady, stronger than it had been in weeks. "Would you like to explain what you just put in my IV? Jennifer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't know what you mean. I was just sitting here holding your hand." "Don't lie to me, Jennifer Marie Sullivan," Margaret said, using the full name that had always meant trouble in childhood. "I may be dying, but I'm not dead yet. And I'm certainly not stupid." The door opened and Detective Walsh entered, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Jennifer Wheeler, you're under arrest for attempted murder assault with a deadly weapon and conspiracy to commit murder." Jennifer spun around, her designer facade cracking. "What? No, I didn't do anything, Dad, tell them." I entered behind the officers, my act of the weak, grieving father completely gone. "I saw everything, Jennifer. We all did. The cameras caught it all." Her eyes darted between us, the reality of the situation crashing down. You set me up, both of you." "You set yourself up," I said coldly. "The moment you decided your mother's life was worth less than your credit card debt." "It wasn't like that," she cried as an officer began reading her rights. "Preston said it was merciful. He said she was suffering anyway. We were just trying to help." "Help yourself to our money, you mean?" Margaret said from the bed. "Oh, Jennifer, how could you become this person?" As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Jennifer's carefully constructed image shattered completely. "You don't understand. We were going to lose everything, the house, the cars, our whole life. Preston said you had plenty of money that you wouldn't even need it where you were going. And my life insurance, I asked. Were you planning to help me along too? That forged application in my name was quite thorough. Her silence was answer enough. Preston's being arrested at your hotel as we speak, Detective Walsh informed her. He's been very talkative, trying to save himself by putting all the blame on you. No, Jennifer struggled against the cuffs. It was his idea, all of it. He made me do it. Save it for your lawyer, the detective said, nodding to the officers. Get her out of here. As they led Jennifer away, she turned back one last time. I'm your daughter. How can you do this to me? Margaret's response was quiet, but devastating. You stopped being our daughter the moment you tried to murder me. The room fell silent after they left, the weight of what had just happened settling over us like a heavy blanket. I moved to Margaret's side, taking her hand gently. Are you all right? I asked. She squeezed my hand, tears finally flowing. No, but I will be. We did the right thing, didn't we? We did, I assured her. She made her choice. We just made sure there were consequences. Dr. Harrison entered, having watched everything from the security office. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to run some tests, make sure whatever she injected didn't somehow contaminate anything. Though I'm confident our precautions worked. Dr. Bice, Margaret said, what would have happened if she'd succeeded? What was in that syringe? He consulted the initial field test results on his tablet. A concentrated dose of potassium chloride. In your condition with your already weakened heart, it would have caused cardiac arrest within minutes. The death would have looked natural, just another cancer patient whose heart gave out. I felt sick. My own daughter had walked in here with literal death in her purse, ready to murder her mother for money. There's something else, Dr. Harrison continued. Now that we know someone was poisoning you before we can adjust your treatment, some of the organ damage might be reversible. I'm not making promises, but Margaret, you might have more time than we thought. A spark of hope in the midst of all this darkness. I kissed my wife's forehead as the medical team bustled around us, beginning new tests and treatments. Later that evening, after the police had collected all the evidence and the hospital had returned to some semblance of normal, Amy and Carol arrived. We'd called them once Jennifer was in custody, and they'd driven straight through from Chicago and Cleveland, respectively. The reunion was tearful, with both daughters horrified by what their sister had done, but grateful their mother was safe. As I watched my remaining family gather around Margaret's bed, I realized that while we'd lost one daughter to greed, we'd saved everything that truly mattered. Jennifer had flown to Hawaii, thinking she was escaping the burden of a dying mother. When she returned, she'd walked into a trap of her own, making seeing not a helpless victim, but a mother's eyes full of knowledge and disappointment. That image I knew would haunt her far longer than any prison sentence. 2 hours after Jennifer's arrest, she was back at the hospital, this time in custody, and desperate. The detectives had allowed her one chance to speak with us before booking, perhaps hoping for a full confession. She sat in a small conference room, hands cuffed to the table, her designer dress wrinkled and her perfect makeup streaked with tears. 25 minutes, Detective Walsh told us. That's all I can give you. Margaret insisted on coming, despite Dr. Harrison's protests. We wheeled her in IV pole and all, and she faced her eldest daughter with a strength that belied her physical condition. Amy and Carol flanked us, their faces masks of disbelief and disgust. How could you? Amy spoke first, her voice shaking. She's our mother. Jennifer's eyes darted between her sisters. You don't understand. You both have your perfect lives, your stable jobs. You don't know what it's like to watch everything fall apart. So you decided to murder Mom? Carol's voice was ice. That was your solution! I wasn't murdering her. Jennifer slammed her cuffed hands on the table. She's dying anyway. The doctor said weeks, maybe a month. I was being merciful. Don't, Margaret said quietly, and everyone fell silent. Don't you dare call attempted murder mercy. I raised you better than this. Jennifer's facade cracked further. You raised me to believe family helps family. Where was that help when Preston's business failed When we were drowning in debt, did you offer to help? No. You just sat on your millions while we suffered. I leaned forward. You never asked for help, Jennifer. You were too proud, too busy keeping up appearances. And even if you had asked, did you think we'd give money to Preston after he was fired for fraud? Jennifer's eyes widened. How did you? We know everything. I continued pulling out the folder Gary had compiled. The $380,000 in debt. The forged life insurance application in my name. Preston's searches about accidental death and inheritance law. The emails with that death doula learning how to make murder look like natural causes. With each revelation, Jennifer seemed to shrink into herself. Preston said you'd never find out. He said old people don't understand technology, that you'd be too grief-stricken to notice anything. Well, Preston was wrong about a lot of things, Gary said from the doorway, entering with a laptop. Including his password security. Would you like to know what your husband's been up to while you've been in custody? Jennifer looked up sharply. What do you mean? Gary turned the laptop toward her, showing a series of messages. These are from Preston's phone, sent about an hour ago. He's not just putting all the blame on you. He's claiming you were unstable, that he tried to stop you, that he's been documenting your mental decline for months. The messages were damning. Preston had thrown Jennifer under every bus he could find, even suggesting she'd forged the life insurance documents herself, and had been planning to kill him next for his smaller policy. No, Jennifer whispered, reading message after message. He wouldn't. We're a team. Everything we did together. Everything, I asked pointedly, including the research on how to cause my accidental death, the plans for a carbon monoxide leak in my truck, the inquiries about hiring someone to tamper with my brake lines. Jennifer's face went white. We weren't really going to, but you researched it, Detective Walsh interjected. We have the search histories, the forum posts asking theoretical questions, the deleted bookmarks about inheriting from both parents versus one. Margaret spoke again, her voice steady, despite the pain in her eyes. You were planning to kill us both. The money from just Mom wouldn't have been enough. Jennifer exploded, then caught herself realizing what she'd admitted. I mean, I didn't. Stop, Carol said, tears streaming down her face. Just stop lying. For once in your life, tell the truth. Jennifer looked around the room at her family, her sister's disgusted faces, her mother's disappointed eyes, her father's cold anger. Something finally broke inside her. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, we planned it all. Preston said it was the only way. We owed so much money and you had so much. Mom was dying anyway, and Dad... She looked at me with something like hatred. You always loved the company more than us. 60-hour weeks our whole childhood, missing recitals and games for construction deadlines. So I deserved to die, I asked quietly. You were supposed to have an accident after Mom passed. Preston had it all figured out. Make it look like grief and carelessness. No one would suspect anything. She laughed bitterly. But you had to play detective, didn't you? Had to hire Gary, set up cameras, turn Mom against me. I didn't turn anyone against you, Margaret said firmly. You did that yourself when you decided our lives were worth less than your debt. It wasn't supposed to go this far, Jennifer said, her voice breaking. At first it was just talk. Preston would say things like, if only we had that insurance money, or it's not fair they have so much while we suffer. Then it became planning, and then... She gestured helplessly. Then attempted murder. Amy finished coldly. Our sister, the would-be killer. A knock on the door interrupted us. Detective Walsh answered it, speaking quietly with someone before turning back. Mr. Sullivan. There's been a development. Preston Wheeler was just in a serious car accident while being transported to county. He didn't make it. Jennifer's scream was primal. No, you're lying. You're trying to break me. I'm sorry, Mrs. Wheeler. His vehicle was hit by a drunk driver. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Preston, who'd planned so carefully to cause accidental deaths, had died in an actual accident. Jennifer collapsed onto the table, sobbing uncontrollably. "He's gone," she wept. "Everything we did, everything we planned, and he's gone." "Everything you did was for nothing," Carol said. "You destroyed our family, tried to kill our parents, and for what money you'll never see from a prison cell." Jennifer looked up, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. "I've lost everything." "No," Margaret said quietly. "We've lost everything. We lost our daughter to greed. We lost the little girl who used to write in her diary about how much she loved her family. We lost Jenny and got a stranger who could plan our murders over spreadsheets." I pulled out one final document from the folder. "There's something else you should know, Jennifer. 3 days ago, I restructured our entire estate into an irrevocable trust. You were removed as a beneficiary from everything: the will, the life insurance, the investment accounts. Even if you'd succeeded, you would have gotten nothing." The last bit of hope died in her eyes. "You mean, every crime you committed, every line you crossed, it was all for nothing? The money was already gone from your reach before you ever put that syringe in Mom's IV." Jennifer stared at the document, reading the legal language that cut her out of millions in inheritance. "When did I stop being your daughter?" she asked in a small voice. "When you started seeing us as ATMs instead of parents," I replied. "When Preston's poison infected your heart, and you chose money over family." "I think we're done here," Margaret said, exhaustion clear in her voice. "Detective, she's all yours." As the officers prepared to take Jennifer away, she made one last plea. "Mom, please. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Can you ever forgive me?" Margaret looked at her eldest daughter, the one she'd carried for 9 months, whose first steps and words were cherished memories, who'd grown up to plan her death. Someday, maybe. But forgiveness doesn't mean freedom from consequences. You made your choices, Jennifer. Now you have to live with them. Live. "Or die with them," Jennifer said bitterly. 25 to life, the lawyer said. "I'll be old when I get out if I ever do." "You'll be alive," I pointed out, "which is more than you planned for us." They led her away then, and I wondered if I'd ever see my daughter again outside of prison walls. Amy and Carol held each other, crying for the sister they'd lost. Margaret reached for my hand, and I could feel her trembling. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked again, seeking reassurance. "She was going to kill you," Amy said fiercely. "Both of you. You absolutely did the right thing." "It doesn't feel right," Margaret admitted. "It feels like my heart's been ripped out." We returned to her room, the family smaller by 2, the daughter lost to greed, and the son-in-law whose manipulation had started it all. As I helped Margaret back into bed, Dr. Harrison arrived with unexpected news. "I have your test results," he said, his face showing cautious optimism. "Now that we've eliminated the toxins Jennifer was introducing, your kidney and liver function are improving, combined with the immunotherapy responding better than expected." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think we might be looking at months instead of weeks, maybe longer. A gift born from horror. Margaret would live longer because we'd stopped our daughter from killing her." The irony was as bitter as it was sweet. That night, as I held vigil beside my wife once again, I thought about the revelations of the day. Jennifer hadn't just confessed to planning our murders. She'd revealed the depth of her resentment, years of perceived slights and jealousies we'd never known existed. Had I really been so absent? Had my work building a future for my family actually helped destroy it? Margaret has always seemed to read my thoughts. "Don't," she said softly. "Don't blame yourself for her choices. You were a good father. You provided for us, loved us, taught us right from wrong. She chose to ignore those lessons. But what she said about me loving the company more than the family was manipulation," Margaret finished. "Remember the soccer games you did attend, the driving lessons, the college visits, the walks where you taught her about integrity and hard work? She remembers them too, Robert. She just chose to forget when it became convenient. As the monitors beeped steadily and the hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm, I realized the true revelation of the day wasn't Jennifer's confession, or Preston's death, or even the trust documents. It was simpler and sadder. Sometimes the people we love choose darkness, and no amount of light we provided can change that choice. But we had Amy and Carol, and Margaret had more time, and maybe that would be enough to heal the wound Jennifer had torn in our family. Maybe. 6 months later, I sat in the packed courtroom as Jennifer's trial reached its conclusion. The intervening time had been a whirlwind of legal procedures, media attention, and family healing. Margaret sat beside me, remarkably stronger, her cancer in remission against all odds. Dr. Harrison called it a miracle. I called it Margaret's stubborn refusal to let Jennifer's actions be her final chapter. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Catherine Mills, had built an ironclad case. She stood now for her closing argument, commanding the room's attention. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard the evidence. You've seen the security footage of Jennifer Wheeler injecting what she believed was a lethal dose of potassium chloride into her mother's IV. You've read the emails where she sought advice on hastening death. You've seen the forged insurance documents, the financial records showing massive debt, and the search histories planning both parents' murders. She paused, letting the weight of evidence settle. The defense wants you to believe Mrs. Wheeler was a desperate woman manipulated by her late husband. But desperation doesn't excuse attempted murder. Manipulation doesn't forgive plotting to kill both parents for insurance money. Jennifer Wheeler made choices calculated and cold, and those choices nearly cost Margaret Sullivan her life. Jennifer sat at the defense table, a shadow of her former self. 6 months in county jail awaiting trial had stripped away the designer facade. Her lawyer, a public defender named Thomas Garrett, had done his best with an impossible case, arguing diminished capacity and coercion. When Jennifer took the stand against her lawyer's advice, the courtroom held its breath. She wore a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back, trying to look sympathetic. But her testimony unraveled her defense completely. Mrs. Wheeler, the prosecutor, began, "You've claimed your husband pressured you into these actions. Yet wasn't it you who first contacted the death doula?" Jennifer hesitated. "Preston gave me her information." "But you made the call. You asked the questions about medication interactions." "Yes, but..." "And wasn't it you who obtained the potassium chloride? You who filled the syringe? You who waited until you were alone to inject it?" Each question hammered another nail in her defense. Jennifer's attempts to deflect responsibility only made her look worse. When she accidentally admitted to knowing the injection could be fatal, several jurors shook their heads. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, Jennifer's college roommate, Sarah Hendricks, whom Gary had tracked down during his investigation. Jennifer used to joke about it. Sarah testified clearly uncomfortable but determined. She'd say things like, "I can't wait for my inheritance," or "Shame you can't speed up getting family money." I thought it was just dark humor until she asked me hypothetically about untraceable poisons for a creative writing project. That was 10 years ago. This revelation destroyed the defense's timeline that Preston had corrupted Jennifer. She'd been thinking about inheriting early, long before meeting him. Margaret's testimony was the emotional pinnacle of the trial. She walked to the stand with dignity, every eye in the courtroom on her. When asked to describe the impact of Jennifer's actions, she spoke with quiet power. "I faced cancer with hope, knowing I had my family's love to sustain me. To discover my own daughter was poisoning me, planning my death, while holding my hand and calling me mom. It's a betrayal beyond words. I've lost more than my health. I've lost my firstborn child to greed." "Do you hate her?" the prosecutor asked gently. Margaret looked directly at Jennifer. "No, I pity her. She traded her soul for money she'll never see, destroyed her family for debts that could have been handled honestly. I'll always love the daughter she was, But I mourn her as if she died because the Jennifer I raised would never have done this. Jennifer broke down crying, but it was too late for tears to matter. I testified about finding the diary hiring Gary, setting up the trap. I kept my testimony factual, but when asked about the impact, I couldn't keep the emotion out. I spent 40 years building a business not for myself, but to provide for my family. To know Jennifer saw us only as obstacles to wealth, that she could plan our deaths like a business transaction. It's broken something in me that will never fully heal. The defense's case was thin. They called character witnesses who hadn't seen Jennifer in years, a psychologist who testified about financial stress without having examined Jennifer, and finally Jennifer herself for redirect. But every attempt to minimize her actions failed against the mountain of evidence. Garrett's closing argument made a valiant effort. Jennifer Wheeler is guilty of making terrible decisions under impossible pressure. But she's not a monster. She's a woman who lost her way, manipulated by a husband who's no longer here to take responsibility. Prison won't undo her actions. Mercy might help her find redemption. When the jury returned after just 3 hours of deliberation, we all knew the verdict before they spoke. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of forgery, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. The litany continued through all charges. Jennifer stood stoically until the final verdict, then collapsed into her chair. Amy and Carol, sitting behind us, held each other and cried, grieving the sister they'd lost to darkness. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. Judge Patricia Lawson, known for her tough but fair approach, had reviewed all materials, including victim impact statements and Jennifer's lack of prior record. Mrs. Wheeler, the judge, began, "You stand before me convicted of attempting to murder your mother, a woman already fighting cancer for financial gain. You planned similar violence against your father. You did this not in a moment of passion, but with careful premeditation, seeking advice on how to kill without detection." Jennifer stood in her orange jumpsuit, shackled, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "I've read letters from your sisters, your parents, family, friends, all expressing shock that you could commit such acts. I've also read your own statement accepting responsibility, though it rings hollow after your attempts at trial to blame everyone but yourself." The judge paused, studying Jennifer over her glasses. "The pre-sentencing report indicates you've begun therapy in jail, that you're teaching literacy to other inmates. These are positive steps, but they don't erase the severity of your crimes. For attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years. For conspiracy to commit murder, 15 years. For forgery and fraud, 5 years each. These sentences will run concurrently, with a minimum of 20 years before parole eligibility." Jennifer swayed but remained standing. 20 years. She'd be in her 60s before she could even apply for parole. "Mrs. Wheeler," the judge continued, "you had everything: loving parents, a good education, opportunities many never receive. You threw it all away for money. Your mother survived not because of your mercy, but despite your malice. Your father lives with the knowledge his daughter planned his death. Your sisters lost a sibling to greed. These are wounds that may never heal." Before the bailiffs led her away, Jennifer turned to us one last time. "I'm sorry," she mouthed, tears streaming down her face. Margaret surprised everyone by standing and speaking clearly. "I forgive you, Jennifer. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Use these years to find the person you used to be." As Jennifer was led away to begin her decades-long sentence, I felt neither satisfaction nor relief, just a profound sadness for the waste of a life that could have been so different. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but we pushed through to our car. Amy drove while Carol navigated our family unit, smaller but somehow stronger. Margaret reached for my hand in the back seat. "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Like I've buried a child," she replied. "But also like I can finally heal, really heal, without wondering if someone's poisoning me. That evening we gathered at Amy's house for dinner. Her husband Marcus had prepared a feast, and their twin boys provided the chaos and laughter we desperately needed. Carol's girlfriend Diana had flown in for support, and even my brother James joined us. To survival. James toasted, raising his glass. To family that chooses love over greed, truth over deception. We clinked glasses, but I noticed we all avoided saying Jennifer's name. She'd become the ghost at our table, present in her absence, a cautionary tale written in our hearts. Later, as Margaret and I walked in Amy's garden, she voiced what we'd all been thinking. "Do you think she'll change? Really change?" "I don't know," I admitted. 20 years is a long time. Maybe she'll find her way back to who she was. Maybe prison will teach her what we couldn't. "I hope so," Margaret said, leaning into me. "I'd like to think our daughter is still in there somewhere, buried under the greed and bitterness." As stars appeared overhead, I thought about justice and redemption, about choices and consequences. Jennifer had received her reckoning legal and final, but our reckoning was ongoing: how to heal, how to move forward, how to love the memory of who she'd been, while accepting the reality of who she'd become. The trial was over, the sentence pronounced, but the echoes of betrayal would resonate for years. Still, we had each other. We had truth on our side, and Margaret had life ahead of her that Jennifer had tried to steal. Sometimes that has to be enough. 2 years after the trial, Margaret and I stood on the deck of our new beach house in Traverse City, Michigan, watching the sun set over Lake Michigan. We'd sold the old house with its poisoned memories and started fresh in a place where Jennifer's betrayal didn't lurk in every corner. Margaret's hair had grown back, silver and beautiful, her cancer still in remission, defying every odd. Letter day. Margaret said softly, holding an envelope we both recognized. Jennifer wrote from prison monthly now, her letters evolving from angry accusations to gradual acceptance, to what seemed like genuine remorse. I took the envelope, but didn't open it yet, following our ritual of reading them together after dinner. "The boys are here," Amy called from inside, and we turned to see our grandchildren, now 8 years old, racing onto the deck to hug us. Amy followed with Marcus, and a surprise, she was visibly pregnant. "We wanted to tell you in person," she beamed. "Due in December, a girl this time." Margaret cried happy tears, holding her middle daughter close. "Have you picked a name?" "Hope," Amy said. "After everything our family's been through, it seemed fitting." Carol arrived an hour later with Diana, and their own announcement they were adopting a little boy from foster care. "He's been through some trauma, but we think we can give him the stable home he needs," Carol explained. Our family was growing, healing, choosing life and love over the darkness that had nearly consumed us. After dinner, Margaret and I sat alone on the deck and opened Jennifer's letter. Her handwriting had changed, become smaller, more careful. "Dear Mom and Dad, today marks 2 years since my sentencing. I've been thinking about that courtroom, about the look on your faces when they led me away. I see those faces every night before I sleep. I teach full-time in the prison literacy program now. Yesterday, one of my students, Maria, read her first complete sentence. She cried. So did I, remembering how you taught me to read, Mom, how patient you were when I struggled with dyslexia. I've been seeing the prison therapist, Dr. Chen. She's helping me understand how I became someone capable of planning your deaths. It wasn't just Preston or the debt. It was something broken in me, a greed that grew until it consumed everything good. I won't ask for forgiveness again. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know I'm trying to become someone worthy of having been your daughter. Maybe I can't undo the monster I became, but I can try to do some good here. Preston's family sued me for wrongful death, claiming I drove him to his actions. The irony isn't lost on me. They lost, but the legal fees took everything I had left. I'm truly starting from nothing, but somehow that feels right. Amy sent photos of the twins. They're beautiful. I'm glad they'll never know their aunt, the attempted murderer, only the cautionary tale. Carol wrote that she's happy. I'm glad. I took so much from our family. I'm grateful something good survived. I dream sometimes that I'm at your beach house. Amy mentioned you moved. We're having dinner laughing about something silly. Then I wake up in my cell and remember why I'm here. 20 years feels like forever, but it's less than you would have lost if I'd succeeded. I love you both, though I have no right to. Jennifer. Margaret folded the letter carefully. She's changing. Maybe, I said cautiously. Or maybe she's just become better at saying what she thinks we want to hear. No, Margaret said with certainty. I know my daughter, even broken as she is. This is real remorse. The question is what we do with it. We'd had this discussion before. Amy and Carol had visited Jennifer twice without telling us initially, reporting back that she seemed genuinely transformed. But trauma doesn't heal easily, and trust once shattered is nearly impossible to rebuild. I want to see her, Margaret said suddenly. Not yet, but someday, when I'm ready, when I can look at her without seeing that syringe. I nodded, understanding. We'd been in therapy ourselves, working through the trauma of discovering our daughter had tried to kill us. Dr. Williams, our therapist, said forgiveness was a process, not a destination, and everyone moved at their own pace. The next morning we drove to the cemetery where Preston was buried. It had become an annual ritual not to mourn him, but to remind ourselves how his manipulation had destroyed our daughter. His grave was simple, paid for by his distant family, who wanted nothing to do with Jennifer. Such a waste, Margaret said, placing flowers not for Preston, but for who Jennifer might have been without him. 2 lives destroyed by greed. That afternoon, we visited the cancer center where Margaret received treatment. She'd become a volunteer counseling other patients and their families. The staff called her their miracle patient, the woman who survived both cancer and attempted murder. Mrs. Sullivan. A young woman approached us holding a baby. I wanted to thank you again. Your talk last month about finding strength in darkness. It saved me. After she left, Margaret smiled. Something good from something terrible. Maybe that's Jennifer's real legacy, teaching us how strong we really are. 3 months later, Margaret made her decision. We drove to the women's correctional facility where Jennifer was held my hands tight on the steering wheel. Margaret had prepared for weeks with Dr. Williams processing her emotions, preparing for whatever she might feel. Jennifer entered the visiting room in her prison uniform, and for a moment none of us moved. She looked older, thinner, but somehow more solid, more real than the designer-dressed stranger who'd tried to kill her mother. Mom, she whispered, tears already falling. I didn't think you'd ever— I'm not here for you, Margaret said firmly. I'm here for me. I needed to see you to tell you something. Jennifer nodded, waiting. I forgive you, Margaret said. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry hatred for my remaining years. You took so much from me, my trust, my sense of safety, my belief in the daughter I raised. But you didn't take my capacity to love, to choose light over darkness. Mom, I'm not finished, Margaret continued. I forgive you, but we're not reconciled. Maybe someday, maybe never. That depends on who you become in here. Your letters suggest change, but letters are just words. Show me with your life that my daughter still exists somewhere inside the woman who tried to kill me. Jennifer nodded through her tears. I will. I promise. Every day I try to do something good, something that honors who you tried to teach me to be. We talked for an hour, carefully, like navigating a minefield. Jennifer told us about her work with the literacy program, about the women she helped, who reminded her of the family she'd thrown away. She asked about her sisters, but didn't push, when we kept details vague. As we prepared to leave, Jennifer asked quietly, "Will you come again?" Margaret looked at me, and I saw my answer in her eyes. Maybe. We'll see who you are in another year. Walking back to the car, Margaret seemed lighter somehow. I said what I needed to say. The rest is up to her. That evening, we hosted family dinner at the beach house. Amy's daughter Hope was now 3 months old, and Carol's adopted son, David, had begun calling us Grandma and Grandpa. The table was full of laughter and love proof that families could heal and grow after trauma. "I have something to share," I announced during dessert. "I've decided to sell the construction company." Everyone looked surprised. Sullivan Construction had been my life for 4 decades. "But Dad," Amy protested, "you love that company." "I loved building it," I corrected. "I loved providing for my family. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that providing meant more than money. Jennifer accused me of loving the company more than my family. She was wrong, but not entirely. I'm 68 years old. It's time to focus on what really matters." Margaret took my hand, smiling. "We're thinking of traveling. All those places we said we'd visit someday. Someday is now." "What about the company?" Carol asked. "I'm selling it to the employees," I explained. "They've earned it, and it ensures the Sullivan name means something good in this community. The profit will go into trust funds for the grandchildren and charitable foundations Margaret and I want to establish." The conversation turned to travel plans and foundation ideas, the family energized by new beginnings. Later, as we cleaned up, Amy pulled me aside. "Dad, about Jennifer, Carol and I have been thinking. When she gets out, if she's really changed, maybe we could help her start over. Not forget what she did, but maybe help her build something better." I hugged my middle daughter, proud of her generous heart. "That's 20 years away, sweetheart. A lot can happen." "I know. But hope, right? That's what we named my daughter. Hope for better things even when they seem impossible." That night, Margaret and I walked on the beach, the sound of waves, a constant rhythm of renewal. The moon was full, casting silver patterns on the water, and I thought about how far we'd come from that hospital room where Jennifer had tried to end our story. "Do you ever regret turning her in?" Margaret asked. "No," I said without hesitation. "She would have killed you than me. We saved ourselves, but we also saved her from becoming a successful murderer. Prison is better than carrying that weight." "I think about her every day," Margaret admitted. "Wonder what she's doing, if she's safe, if she's really changing or just surviving." "She's both," I said. "Surviving and changing. Whether it's enough, only time will tell." We turned back toward the house where lights glowed warmly against the darkness. Inside, our family was gathered, Amy and Marcus, looking at travel brochures for our upcoming trip, Carol and Diana planning David's 4th birthday party, the children sleeping peacefully upstairs. "We won, didn't we?" Margaret said softly. "Not against Jennifer, but for ourselves. We chose love over bitterness, life over death, family over isolation." "We did," I agreed, "though it cost us more than I ever imagined." "Everything worth having does," she replied. "But look what we gained, more years together, grandchildren who'll grow up knowing their loved daughters who chose integrity over greed, and maybe, just maybe, a daughter who'll find her way back from darkness." As we entered our home, warm with laughter and bright with hope, I realized the ultimate truth of our journey. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't punishment or retribution. Sometimes it's simply living well, choosing love over hate, building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Jennifer had 20 years to prove she could reclaim her humanity. We had whatever years remained to us to show that no betrayal, no matter how deep, could destroy a love built over decades. In the end, that would be our legacy, not the daughter who tried to kill us, but the family that refused to let darkness win. The beach house settled into nighttime quiet, but it was a peaceful silence, not the oppressive stillness of that hospital room where our ordeal began. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to choose light. But tonight we were home. We were together, and we were alive. And that I realized as Margaret curled against me in our bed overlooking the water was the greatest victory of all. "I'd like to ask you something. Have you ever faced a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to move forward? If this story touched your heart or made you think about the complexities of family relationships, please consider leaving a comment below. Your thoughts and experiences help create a community where we can all learn from each other's journeys. If you found value in this story, please hit the like button. It helps others discover these narratives of resilience and redemption. And if you'd like to hear more stories about families overcoming impossible odds, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can heal, that families can rebuild after betrayal, and that choosing forgiveness, even without reconciliation, can be the most powerful choice of all. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. May you always have the wisdom to recognize who truly values you and the strength to protect yourself while keeping your heart open to love. Until next time, remember the greatest inheritance we can leave our children isn't money. It's the example of how to live with integrity, love deeply, and rise above those who would drag us into darkness.